This is The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good morning, Tuscaloosa. Good morning, Tuscaloosa, Internet World, West Alabama. How we doing today on a Friday? It's the Joe Gaither Show. We're live in the Derek Daniel State Farm Studios right here off of McFarland Boulevard. We hope you and yours are doing well. Ready to get into a fun weekend, a full weekend of Alabama athletics as basketball, baseball, softball, all over the place. Alabama athletics is competing this weekend, so we're going to get into that on a Friday edition of the Joe Gaither Show. We are on the Bama Central YouTube channel, the Bama Central Facebook page. We're broadcasting. You can hear us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. You can find the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central. As we said, we're brought to you by Derek Daniel State Farm Insurance. You can call Derek for all of your insurance needs at 205-758-3391. Like a good neighbor, Derek Daniel is there. And of course, we're presented by Purple Turtle Roofing. You can visit roofturtle.com for all of your roofing needs. You can check out all their products and services. Set up a free appointment right there at roofturtle.com. So we're going to have a lot of fun today with our friend Theo Fernandez covering all things Alabama athletics for BamaCentral.com. Follow Theo Fernandez at Theo Fernandez _. We're going to talk baseball just a little bit towards the back little portion of the show as Alabama is going out to Texas to take on several better teams than they have played so far. Well, I guess there might maybe nothing better than Southern Miss than they saw on Tuesday. But Alabama playing 3 Power 4 teams out in Texas. Theo will give us a preview of that pretty soon. We're going to talk about the 40 as well as several of Alabama players were up at the NFL Combine, so we're going to get into that towards the back end. But we're going to lead our show with Owen Barnes. You follow him on the Twitter machine at Owen D. Barnes. You follow him on YouTube at Barnes on Bama. We're going to talk a lot of basketball with Owen Barnes because he is really, really up on the basketball team. We want to get his opinions, his expertise as the team and season has 3 more games left, and Alabama has a huge rematch tomorrow against the Tennessee Vols. So with that, Theo, how we doing today? Good to see you, sir.
Doing great. It's been a fun 24 hours. A lot going on. Fast week. Can't believe we're already at Friday, right? But it's been a good couple days here.
It seems like just yesterday I was driving through the the country, getting back here. But yes, it has been a fast week. So we're excited about a big win on Wednesday for the men's basketball team over Mississippi State, 100-75. Owen was in the building. Owen, good morning. Thank you for your time. Make sure you go follow him at Owen D. Barnes on the Twitter machine and subscribe to his YouTube channel, Barnes on Bama. Owen, good morning. How are you, sir? Thank you for your time.
Doing great. Glad to join you guys.
Absolutely. So, let's take you back to Wednesday. And really, I just want to kind of get your feel on this basketball team because Alabama, big win on Wednesday without LeBaron Philon. What did you make of Wednesday's game? And really, where are you with this basketball team this season? Because it's been such a big roller coaster.
Yeah. So for Wednesday, I think the no LeBaron Philon, I think some people took a little bit more from that than maybe I did. I look at LeBaron just needing the rest, and I look at Mississippi State as a team that really has 2 scorers on a good day. Usually, they have Jaden Epps, they have Josh Hubbard, and they're one of the easier scouts that we play all season. Just because of how they play, and their defense is not what it has been in some of the years past under Chris Jans. So they haven't been forcing as many turnovers. And when you combine all of that with how they've been guarding the 3-point line, I think that's what you really saw in that first half. As much as Alabama shot the cover off the basketball, and they absolutely did, you don't make 16 threes without shooting the ball pretty well. Mississippi State really had no business guarding us from the 3-point line. They really were trying to pack it on the inside. I really feel like they saw what happened against Arkansas, and they saw Aiden Sherrill just getting dunk after dunk after dunk, and they wanted to prevent that because Aiden had kind of been on a tear. And then they just didn't guard us from the 3-point line, and that's just not a recipe for success against Alabama. I don't really care what you're doing, especially inside Coleman Coliseum. That's not a great recipe for success. So in my mind, this was more of Mississippi State just had a terrible game plan for how you defend Alabama. You combine that with good ball movement to start the game, and Alabama gets 63 points. And the stat that I kind of said to my buddy I was sitting next to was Mississippi State went 4 of 15 in the first half from 2. They could have gone 15 for 15 and they still would have been down 8 points. That's how big the 3-point line was in the first half of this game.
So yeah, let's talk about Alabama and the way the offense looked, right, and the way we just saw them firing so much from three, and it really felt like the stereotypical Nate Oates offense to me, right, where you're playing that fast and you're getting the threes or you're not taking the non-rim twos, right, and that's one of the things that me, Joe, and Hunter DeCiver talked about a lot with LeBaron, the offense with versus without LeBaron Philon yesterday. Do you think that? Like, I guess what's your take on the dynamic of the offense when it's Aiden Holloway leading versus LeBaron kind of leading things for Alabama?
So I think against Mississippi State, I think the offense would have probably looked very similar. I think it was a function of the team you were playing and how they were defending you. Um, I don't think that same philosophy is going to work, for example, against Tennessee, because Tennessee, even though historically, if you look at their KenPom numbers, they give up a lot of threes. They don't give up a lot of threes to Alabama, right? Like last year, I think they gave up like 25 attempts or something. They just generally don't give up a ton. So in my mind, LeBaron Philon definitely has a little bit more proclivity or whatever you want to call it to shoot the mid range. And when he gets to his spot. However, I do think that it's a situation of the Mississippi State game. I don't know that it would have mattered one way or the other who was your point guard in that game. I think that where LeBaron Philon gets you is like, say, for the Arkansas game, when you have a true like end of possession, you got to have something. LeBaron's ability to just go get you one, I think, is kind of the big deal. Amari Allen has that as well. You saw his mid range with the 5 seconds on the shot clock, in the overtime, I believe, of that Arkansas game. There's definitely moments, but in my mind, I think the ball pops a little faster, and I said that on my show. I think that the ball moves definitely a little faster with Holloway, but I don't think that the Mississippi State game would have looked that much different if LeBaron Philon was playing. I think that just had more to do with how Mississippi State guarded us than it had to do with how Mississippi State was doing. I also think Mississippi State just didn't get a lot of rebounds. And so it wasn't the physical game that some others have been. I mean, I think there was like 25 total fouls in the entire game. It was like 11 and 14 fouls. So I think the Mississippi State game is not what you should point to if you're saying, oh, LeBaron does this. Now, I completely get where you're coming from, and I would agree, but I just don't think the Mississippi State game is a great barometer for thinking about that.
We're hanging out with Owen Barnes talking Alabama basketball. And Owen, why don't we just go right into your opinion or your evaluation of LeBaron this season? Coming back for a second year, foregoing his time in the draft, and he's now number 3 in the SEC in scoring at 21.3 points per game. So really filling it up from a scoring standpoint. Would you evaluate LeBaron's play this year?
It's definitely better than it was last season. His shot's gotten a lot better. His splits have gotten a lot better. I think a lot of people point to his turnovers, and I think that's for good reason. I'm somebody that, digs into the stats a lot, and his turnover rate's actually down, which is a little crazy. That shows you just how much he's handling the basketball this season. Even with that turnover rate being down, I'm with Nate Oates. In a big game, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in the Tennessee, but like we need 3 or less turnovers from LeBaron because the games where we've had problems, he's had that 4, 5, 6 turnovers. And the offense just doesn't look the same. And a lot of that's decision making. A lot of that's getting sped up. I think a lot of that's knowing that he's one of the best players on the floor and trying to maybe do a little too much. I don't think that it's always bad decision making. I just think it's trying to force a pass that you didn't have to, right? Like a guy's cutting and like it's not fully there, but you still think you can get it there. So I think that that's one of the ups and downs that you've seen with LeBaron. But for me, I think that what he gives you is that guy who can just go get you one. Again, I think that's a huge thing when you're talking March, when you're talking end of game scenarios like that Arkansas game, to know that you had a guy that if he's got to get you a bucket, he can do it. I think that that's a really good thing. The fact that his 3-point shot's gotten so much better is obviously huge for us. I think the one place where you've seen a little bit of a downtick, and Nate's talked about it in press conferences, is the steal numbers. I think his on-ball pressure has not been what we saw like at the end of that Auburn game. The thing I always point to is the Mark Sears floater gets a lot of love against Auburn last season, but the only reason Mark Sears has the ability to hit the floater to win the game is LeBaron gets a steal run out against Auburn like a minute before, right? Like he gets a steal into a dunk. And so you just can't have the floater without the steal. And I think that on ball pressure is where Nate would like to see him ramp it up. From a stats perspective, he's almost like a full percentage point below what he was last season, like 2.9 to 2.1. So, I mean, that's the number that you would like to see go up a little bit. You even saw Trelly do one of those against Mississippi State. That just gives you those fast runouts and it gives you some quick points on the other end that you don't have to worry about the rebounds. You don't have to, they don't set up their defense. There's so many things that allows you to do. And I think it is a part of Nate Oates' team, even though I'm sure y'all have talked about here on the show how Alabama just is not a team that forces a lot of turnovers this season. They're almost dead last in the country in steal rate or turnover rate.
So do you think you're hitting right on it with LeBaron with the defense? Do you think the defensive maybe downturn is due to maybe asking more from him on the offensive end, or is it just, I don't want to say laziness because that's not fair. Is it playing better guards? What how would you assess, or what's your assessment of the defensive maybe step back?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I think the minutes he plays definitely has to have some type of impact, right? Like if LeBaron's playing 41 minutes, I don't think you're gonna get that, in your face pressure defense the whole time. It's just not realistic to think that. I think additionally, the fact that he was more of your backup point guard last season, he was sometimes going up against people that weren't quite as fresh. Now, granted, he did start a lot of games, but the time when he was your main guard and Sears wasn't holding the ball, I feel like it was just a different kind of time in the game, so to speak. And then additionally, I think that there was a situation, and you heard it in the offseason, that LeBaron Fallon felt like he had a lot to prove last season because, if anybody followed his recruitment, he was a guy that Nate Oates wasn't even sure he wanted to take because he wasn't sure his defense was any good. LeBaron was a guy who they thought, and Nate's even mentioned it, they thought coming in prior to getting him that he might redshirt. And then when summer practice happens, from what I've heard, he was giving it to Mark Sears during summer practice, and it was clear this guy has to play. So I think that LeBaron was trying to show on the court, like, hey, this is what I've got. And then what he showed last season, then when he went to the NBA combine or, went through the process, I think he was told, hey, we need to see more decision making. We need to see more leadership. We need to see more shooting. We already know you have the steals. So I also think it's a situation of what the NBA told him they needed to see maybe wasn't the same as what he thought he needed the year before, if that makes sense. So it's just like what he put an emphasis on in his mind was something a little different. And so you're seeing the difference on the court.
I agree with that, right? To a certain extent, the NBA scouts already know that he can get the steals. They know he's got that. He has fast twitch. So, yeah, I agree with that take. I want to talk more. You briefly alluded to matchups with LeBaron. And I thought the game against Arkansas was so fascinating because, you've got LeBaron going head to head with another elite guard, both in college and a guy who will be taken in the NBA. Oates talked so much about you don't need to outscore him. You just need to come out, do the right things. And he talked about LeBaron getting more assists and having the low turnover numbers. How do you feel about LeBaron entering he's going to have some very big guard matchups over the last week, right? And over the next couple weeks, rather, in the SEC tournament, in March Madness. How do you feel about, I guess, his preparedness and ability to compete in those matchups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, the matchup against Arkansas, I think, did a lot to prepare him for what that's going to look like. I think the fact that he took it to heart of you don't have to force something, you have teammates. That's something that at times I feel like LeBaron can sometimes put all the weight on his own shoulders. And so the fact that he, passes off to Houston for a big shot in overtime, or the fact that you just have the ability to trust your teammates and know that you have five guys on the floor and not just one. I think that that's a really big deal. I also think that, it, are we going to play some good guards? Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about Jacoby Gillespie when we move on to Tennessee. I mean, there's some definitely good guards he's going to play, but that matchup with Arkansas and Darius Acuff, there's none better than that in the country, right? Like Darius Acuff is going to be, I don't care that he's a freshman. He's going to be one of the best guards in the country. He's going to be a lottery pick. This is a guy that the fact that LeBaron was able to go toe to toe with him is a big deal. And I also think that the fact that LeBaron knows that, hey, I don't have to outscore him is LeBaron, the team, Nate Oates understanding like, kind of when we just talked about with Mississippi State had 2 scores. Alabama had 5 scores with double figures, and everyone other than Noah Williamson had at least 5 points on the team against Mississippi State, right? This is a team that Alabama consistently gets scoring across the whole team. So you don't have to put the whole weight on your shoulders. You know you've got scoring from every level with Alabama basketball. And I think that that's something that really prepares him for the future, is knowing that you ain't got to be the guy. You don't have to go out there and get me 50 to win this game. You get me 20 and 7 and, give me 7 assists. I think we got a good shot to win this one, right? I think that that's what LeBaron has to just understand, is his ability to get his teammates involved in large part is way more important. And I think that the thing that he does better than most is that he can get to his spot down low, and the penetrate and kick is obviously where Alabama's offense is the best. And I think that his physicality to be able to get down low obviously gives you a little bit of a fire and ice compared to Aiden's speed.
We're hanging out with Owen Barnes. Make sure you follow him on YouTube at Barnes on Bama. We're talking about Alabama basketball. And Owen, I believe I saw this from your Twitter, Owen D. Barnes. Maybe it was somebody else that you were interacting with, basically saying that this season has been Nate Oates' best coaching season since he's been in Tuscaloosa. I apologize if that wasn't your take, but but what do you think about that? How has Nate Oates really worked his way through this year, given all the hurdles that he's had to deal with?
Yeah, I was interacting with Thomas Mack. I 100% would agree with that. I think that when you look at Nate Oates' coaching, I think that a lot of people look at it as like what the high end success looks like. And I don't disagree with that general sentiment, but I think that if a lot of people are going to compare it to 2023 because that's when Alabama was the #1 overall seed. And I think that that's just unrealistic, because if you look at that team on paper, that team, of course, was a team that should that should have been highly ranked, right? Like maybe you didn't know Brandon Miller was going to be the #2 pick coming in, but you probably should have thought he was going to be a first rounder, right? Like he was going to be a one and done. Like maybe he wasn't #2, but he was going to be close to a one and done. That was year 2 of Charles Bediako, so you were pretty sure that what you had in him. Noah Clowney, another guy that you didn't know was going to be a one and done, but once you learned pretty quickly, it's like, hey, this guy's going to be good. I think that team, you had a lot more certainty on what it was going to look like. When you look at this season, I think there's a lot of things that you have to point to that I thought Nate Oates did a really good job on. One, the fact that the injuries have been such a problem, I think is something that you just absolutely have to circle. We're going to talk about Tennessee coming up. Alabama played the last Tennessee game with only 6 guys, Charles Bediako being one of them, funny enough, playing more than 10 minutes. Amari Allen and Aiden Holloway were not on that list. Latrell Wrightsell had not played the game before, and Taylor Bowen was recently coming back from injury as well, right? So you had 4 guys coming back or not playing at all from injury, and that's not including the 3 guys you've got out for the season. I think that the injury front has been a huge deal, and I think that it's, the stat that I know a lot of people point to is Houston Millette's the only guy on the team this season that has played in every game. The only guy on the team that's been healthy and been able to play in every single game. And I think that just points to the fact that Nate Oates has been able to get consistency, because really, when you look at the teams Alabama's lost to, Alabama still has never, think back to like the 2022 season. That's like my point of like, this is an up and down roller coaster of a team. That team had the highs of beating Gonzaga and the lows of being the only loss to Georgia, right? Like that's truly an inconsistent basketball team. This team may not have some of the consistency that people want. Like you're not beating every team by 20 that you should, but they're still winning the games you should, right? Like the only game you lost you probably shouldn't have was Texas, maybe. And like if Texas is your worst loss, I think they're a top 8 in the SEC tournament right now. Like if that's your worst loss, you're doing something okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's been a solid season. I guess if we're just looking at bigger picture things with this team before we head into Tennessee, the last player I really want to get your take on is Taylor Bowen. And he's been so up and down. He fought the injury, he fought consistency. You've done some good things. What is your evaluation of him, and what kind of role could you see him playing down the stretch?
Yeah, so Taylor Bowen is a very unique case. Now, I just pulled up his KenPom page, and when you look, I think the problem that we look at him is I think we're comparing him to what we thought he was going to be, and I think what we were thinking he was going to be included him playing a larger part of the season, right? Last season, he was a 41% three-point shooter. This season, he's only shooting 30%. I think that is something that people are expecting, to get a little better. I think Nate would point to he had both a wrist injury and leg injuries. And when your legs and wrists aren't healthy, then it's probably a world in which your shot's going to not be quite as good as you want it to be. I think that Taylor has been okay. I think that Taylor's health has been a major problem. I think additionally, the fact that the start of the season, I don't know that Taylor was ready for the physicality that we needed him to play with. And I think that he did make a little bit of a turn when Nate Oates stops starting him. And I'm trying to look and see. I forget exactly what game it was. It was after Arizona. Nate Oates kind of challenged him to be a better rebounder. He ended up having 9 rebounds in the South Florida game, 9 in the Yale game. He had 10 in the Texas game. He had 10 in the Missouri game. I mean, he had 6 Wednesday night. I think that the physicality is something that just struggles for Taylor because he is a tiny human being at 6'10". I think one of the announcers in the preseason called him built like a blade of grass, which is my favorite quote I've ever heard. It's just, I think that that's something that he has struggled with. And I think that his health has been the other part. I think that when you look at Taylor, if you know what you're expecting out of him and you're expecting him to be able to be a stretch 5 that really has a lot of ball skills, you're happy with what you've seen out of Taylor. If you wanted him to match up with a guy like Alex Condon, for example, for Florida, I think you're upset with what you have seen out of him, right? Like, I think your expectations of what you think Taylor is has a lot to do with how happy you've been with him this season. Now, would Nate Oates say it's probably still been a struggle because of the injuries? Absolutely. But I still have to give him some kind of grace with those injuries because when you see him on the floor, he's fighting for everything he's got. And for me, especially because of where I sit, sitting near the bench and seeing Nate Oates' kind of mentality with the players and stuff. For me, it's when they come off that floor, does it look like they're tired and they're coming off because they've given everything they have on the floor? And ever since probably the middle point of the season, you could say absolutely yes for that with Taylor. So for me, I'm happy with what we've got. Do I think he could get better? Absolutely. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be elite next season, but I think that he's giving you a lot, just maybe in a different way than some people expected.
The last big picture question I have for you, Owen, and you can follow Owen at Owen D. Barnes on the Twitter machine, is about Charles Bediako, the saga, getting him back into the program, playing him for 5 games, and now being ineligible and appealing his ruling. Just where do you stand on the Charles Bediako situation? I know it's very, very layered, so that's kind of a big question, but just kind of take us any direction. What have been your feelings as Alabama has been really in the crosshairs of the college basketball media because of the Charles Bediako situation?
Yeah, my thoughts kind of echo that of Jay Billis or echo that of what we've seen across some of the players that have really the people in this saga that have paid attention to the real what has happened, right? Because Roger, a lot of just people have said that I think the people that are looking at this as like, oh, he just left college and now he's coming back are being a little disingenuous with it because what they're telling you is somehow going to college and then leaving and then wanting to come back is somehow better than being a top club player for another team, right? The best thing you can point to currently happening, obviously people are going to say it's not the same, but is the guy who LSU just had commit from the NBL that's 22 years old, right? If you're going to tell me that somebody's playing junior club ball and it's pro ball, but he's been playing it since he was 15 and he's just 18, 19 years old, now he's coming to college, I'll maybe listen to that argument because they don't have the same level high school basketball or they don't have high school basketball because their schooling and sports are not tied in Europe. I'll listen to that argument. I won't listen to the argument of this guy's 22 years old. Now he's coming to the college and he's going to get 4 years of eligibility. I completely disagree with that being any markedly different than Charles Bediako because this guy is coming in at 22 years old. He's getting 4 years of eligibility. Charles is 23. He has at best 3 games of eligibility or a semester of eligibility, right? Like if he was to win the appeal or whatever, right? I think that's where I personally look at it as people just being a little disingenuous with it. I'm of the mindset that maybe they should adopt, and I forget who it was. Actually, it was over on Cover Crimson. Stacy was talking, or not Stacy. Clint was talking to I forget who he had on. Who called our game?
Richard Hendricks.
Richard Hendricks. Richard said, his thought process was, why don't they just more adopt kind of, I guess, a semi-baseball draft philosophy of like, you can enter the draft, but until you sign the contract, you can still come back. Right? Like, I don't hate that idea, right? Because at the NBA draft, his thought process is, when you, as a player, he was like, you go through the NBA draft, you're maybe told, hey, we really like you at this number, but as soon as that number comes and goes, the next team that likes you may be 20-30 spots later. And so it's a situation where you even came out, and I think he came out on bad advice personally, because I think that of the way the NIL structure was happening with Canada, I think was a major problem. But I do think that the fact that he came out on bad advice, if he was given the option right after that NBA draft, like no signing G League, no signing anything, if he was told that day you can come back to Alabama, I think you would have. And then we no longer have this issue. So I think that that's what you have to look at, the idea that going to the draft foregoes your eligibility. And I think that at a minimum, what Bediako's case is going to do is allow for some reform in college basketball. And I think that you're going to see the process be reshaped in a similar way that Javon Quinterly having to sit out for a year reshaped NIL. I think that that's going to reshape what it looks like. Unfortunately, both guys happened to Alabama, but if we have to help reshape it, then that happens.
Yeah, what do you say about that? If Alabama does it, then it becomes a problem.
I mean, it's just, again, like Javon Quinterly, I mean, it's pretty clear that Jelly Fam and Javon Quinterly was a big reason why NIL looks like it looks today. Maybe not with the rev sharing side, but at least with the NIL side. And like I said, I think it's just a standpoint where it's going to end up having to reform college basketball. And I think that that's going to be better for the sport as a whole. I welcome that, but I do think it's a standpoint where anybody that just thinks that, oh, he left and now he's coming back, and somehow that's worse because he signed a 2-way deal than some G League Ignite guy who signed $1 million contract to play for come on, what are we doing here? Like, I just don't think that that's a genuine argument when you're looking at the ages, the money, like everything involved. There's people that have made more that are older, and all of these guys have been qualified eligible. So I think that's where I look at it is, if you're giving me a legitimate argument, I'm more than happy to hear it. And I think that there are some real arguments you could listen to, but I think that a lot of people are just parroting what they hear from others and like, oh, he got drafted. It's like, there's a guy playing for Baylor right now that got drafted. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a guy playing for Baylor right now that got traded.
There's so much inconsistency here. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I'm assuming we want to get into the
go right ahead. Go right ahead. Yeah, unless you have another bigger picture thought.
No, I do just want to acknowledge we got some breaking news during the program. As of the past 20 minutes, Grant Nelson finally gets his NBA shot, just signed a 10-day contract with the Brooklyn Nets. So kind of fun that we get some Bama breaking news.
Little Grant Nelson, Noah Clowney duo.
He's been
I was going to say, he's going to be backing up Noah, it looks like, if he's getting the 10-day with the Brooklyn Nets.
He's been real good for Long Island. I've looked at some of those games he's played, and he's had some flashes. He was on a minutes restriction for a long time, averaging 11 and 6, real efficient, real clutch. He's had a bunch of he had like a game-stealing block a few weeks ago. He's been fun over there. Excited to see
he was in Coleman for that Arkansas game.
Yes. I think a lot of people wanted him back on the court, right?
See if we can work out a deal. If he's not out of eligibility.
After this 10-day, maybe he'll come straight to.
That's right. That's right. Oh, and why don't we move right into the Tennessee game? Because a huge game tomorrow. Alabama has lost 5 consecutive games to Rick Barnes' Tennessee squad. Tennessee is 8-2 since winning here in Coleman Coliseum. And you earlier outlined kind of the roster issues that Alabama was facing from an injury front. Alabama much healthier going into tomorrow's game. Well, outside of LeBaron not playing Wednesday's game. First, let's start right there. Do you expect LeBaron to play? We'll hear from Nate Oates later today, and I personally would expect LeBaron to play, but I want your opinion, Owen Barnes. And I just kind of want to get your thoughts on last game against Tennessee and the Tennessee matchup as a whole, as the Vols have kind of had Nate Oates' number lately?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would be shocked if LeBaron Fallon does not play. I think that it was more of a standpoint of they had been kicking the can down the road, and LeBaron had been gritting it out to play in some games that they thought they had to have him for. Um, and I think that realistically, if I don't want to, throw a player under the bus, but there are players currently protecting their NBA draft stock, let's say. And I'll let the audience pay attention to who they think that might be. I think some other people may have sat LeBaron in some other games to protect his draft stock, so to speak. I think LeBaron's been gritting through injury for quite some time. And I think that the Mississippi State game was a game where they finally were like, hey, it's coming to a head. It's maybe a little worse than it has been in some other games. But I also think we probably can win this game without you, right? Like, you'd be crazy if you don't think that that factored into this situation at all, right? Like, and so I would be shocked if LeBaron Fallon does not play on Saturday at Tennessee. He's probably going to be listed as, probable or maybe even questionable, but I would be shocked if he doesn't play. Then when you go to the rest of the injury front, I think that Alabama matches up actually reasonably well against Tennessee, and I think that the guy that makes us match up better is having Amari Allen back. Because when you look at who killed us in that first game, it was Nate Ament. And Nate Ament was matched up on Houston Millette and London Jemison. London Jemison played 7 minutes and had 4 fouls. So obviously London's got to be able to stay out of foul trouble. And then Houston Millette, I thought, did an okay job on defense, but he's given up probably 6 inches on Nate Ament. If you have a guy like Amari Allen that's given up, maybe 2 inches and probably has some weight on Ament, if I was guessing, because Ament's a fairly slender guy. I think that Amari Allen is a really good matchup for Ament. And so I think that personally, having Amari Allen back for this game is way more important. Not to say that Aiden Holloway isn't important for this game, because his shooting ability absolutely is, but I think that having Amari Allen back, especially on defense, is potentially going to be a difference maker in this game. And I don't want to get into my prediction yet, but like that, I do think that Amari Allen probably is the biggest factor in this game because we didn't have him in that first one. I think that his personal matchup against Ament is something that we can really exploit, that Ament was able to take advantage of Alabama last time.
Theo, they used to describe me that way, as a fairly slender man. I like that description. I like that description of Ament. I mean, he was amazing here in Tuscaloosa, and you didn't really have any answer for him. I love the you pointing out Amari Allen being able to guard him. Go ahead, Theo.
No, yeah, he was sensational. I mean, there's no other way to put it, right? Freshman coming in and doing that, which is overshadowed by what Acuff did a minute ago. But no, Ament was great. And I guess you look at the larger context, right, and the dominance that Tennessee has had over Alabama. But then on the flip side, okay, you've got a little bit of a cushion, right? You're looking for a top 4 spot. How much pressure do you think should be on Alabama and Nate Oates to win this game, given just all the external factors, I guess?
Honestly, I think that the pressure that's faced on Nate Oates in this game is by Nate Oates himself. I don't think that Nate Oates is hearing the pressure from other people, because if you told me that Alabama lost this game, wins the final 2, and finishes 13-5, I'm not upset with that. So I think that people that are realistic for their thought process on what Alabama could be this season, if you had told us 13-5, especially with how we started SEC play, they probably would have taken it. And so I think that the pressure is from Nate Oates himself, because I think Nate Oates himself, and if you got him in a closed room, and maybe he would admit it, I don't know if he will during the press conference, but I think that he wants this one maybe a little more than some others, because I think he knows that he gave away that game last season. Not calling the timeout on the inbounds play. There were a couple of things where Nate Oates it felt like he was distraught with himself after what happened in Thompson Bowling last season. So I think that Nate personally just wants this game in a bigger way. I think also he thinks that they potentially, I think that if you had to also ask him, I think that he's going to look at the injuries that we've talked about as playing a major role, right? Like Amari Allen's a guy who I personally look at as, if he's not a one and done this season, it's only because of how insanely stacked this draft class is, right? Like he's a one and done in every other season, and still maybe this one, right? Like I'm still of the mindset he's still probably gone this season. But if he's not, it's only because of how crazy this draft class is. And so the fact that he didn't have him for that game, and he's the guy who's probably the best matchup for Ament, I think that Nate's probably putting a lot of pressure on himself for this game. I think that some fans are putting pressure on him, but I think that anybody that's realistic for what we looked at for this season, I think with basketball, you have to look at like this total as a whole. And like if we lost this game, is anything really different as it relates to our seeding? Maybe in the SEC tournament, seeding is a little different, but like your March Madness seeding is going to be about the same. Your total seeding, 13-5 in the SEC, I think is still very easy, relatively achievable. Obviously, you got Georgia and Auburn, but like I think it's fairly achievable. I think that you're happy with where you're at. And so I think that people that are realistic are happy with where we're at, but I think that some people may be upset.
Yeah, looking at the rest of the teams around in your area in the SEC standing, Arkansas still has to play Florida next week. Tennessee has to finish up with Vanderbilt. They beat Vanderbilt about a week ago, so they've got a little confidence there. But the rest of of Alabama's competitors for those top 4 spots have a tough game left on the schedule as well in these three games. So if you lose Saturday, you're probably not going to be falling too far down, and you'll probably stay in the top 4 seeds as long as you win your last 2 games against Georgia and Auburn. We're hanging out with Owen Barnes. You can follow him on the Twitter machine at Owen D Barnes. You can follow him on YouTube and subscribe to his channel at Barnes on Bama. Owen, you mentioned it earlier when we were kind of getting going about Tennessee preventing Alabama from taking a lot of threes, running Alabama off the 3-point line. So tomorrow in the game, is that something that Alabama needs to just find a way to force up more threes or attack the basket? What would be your coaching point? Would you be trying to attack the basket? How can Alabama become more efficient against this Tennessee defense?
Well, I think inherently we're going to probably attack the basket a little, or sorry, shoot the three a little more than we did in the first matchup, because you have to think, again, that first matchup was a lot of Aiden Sherrill and Charles Bediako playing at the same time. So taking 26 threes is more of a nature of who you had on the floor. I think when you add in Aiden Holloway and Amari Allen, you're inherently gonna get some extra threes up. The number that I said on my show last night was, I think that somewhere in that 32 to 35 number is probably the most you're going to see Alabama potentially attempt in this game. So I think that inherently that's going to mean you are going to be attacking the basket some. It's also going to depend on Tennessee's health. JP Estrella has been a guy that only played 6 minutes in this last game. And he's been coming off of injury. And is he going to be fully healthy and ready to go for the lion's share of the minutes like he did for Tennessee in that first game? He played 26 minutes in that first game. And so they really were running him, Felix Okpara, and Nate Ament out there as a group together, which was the reason why we ended up having to run Charles Bediako and Aiden Sherrill out at the same time just to match with their size. If JP Estrella doesn't play in this game, I think that what it does is it allows Alabama to play a more traditional big with just Aiden Sherrill. And I think it also is a standpoint where you're looking at the rebounding, right? And I think that the rebounding is the key to this game, as it is in most games for Alabama up against the physical front court. But I think it's a little more of one in this game, because when you look at what Tennessee is able to do, their scoring is really more from the perimeter and from the pull up with Ament, right? It's really Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Ament, versus some of the teams that Alabama has struggled with the dominant rebounding, have been teams that can score down low, right? You look at an Arizona, you look at a Florida, a Purdue, a Gonzaga. All those teams have dominant front courts, but it's dominant scoring front courts. Tennessee is more scoring in their backcourt and, wing, so to speak, with Nate Ament. So I think that that's something you have to look at, especially with Tennessee being the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the entire country. So I think that that's what we have a situation. That's what you have to look at when you're talking about this Tennessee team. Alabama lost the rebounding battle by 9. I'm of the mindset Alabama needs to be within 5 on the rebounding. And, if you lose the rebounding, you need to lose the defensive rebounding, not the offensive rebounding by crazy numbers, because as we know, the offensive rebounding is kind of a situation where it can set up an open 3 by Jacoby Gillespie, and Alabama just can't have those be happening.
We're hanging out with Owen Barnes, and we're getting ready to give our predictions, Theo and myself. I think Owen's going to give his prediction on one of his shows. Just one more for us here, and as it relates to Jacoby Gillespie. What have you seen out of him this season, and how do you think the guard matchup will go between he and LeBaron Filan? We've talked about LeBaron's defense a good bit earlier. How do you think LeBaron will be able to defend Jacoby Gillespie?
I think that LeBaron will be a good matchup for Gillespie. I think that Gillespie has been he's been more of a volume shooter. And I think that that's something that you have to understand when you're looking at Gillespie is he's going to take a lot of shots. He's a guy who took 21 shots in their Missouri game. He got just 19 points. And that would make you think his efficiency is terrible. His efficiency is not terrible. His 2-point rate this season's been pretty high and not super efficient, but his 3-pointers, he's 35% or so. So he's completely fine. I think it is a standpoint that what we have to do is we have to limit the assists. There's been games like against Oklahoma where he has 8 assists. In that Alabama game, he had just 4, but he was, fairly he was more efficient, I guess. The big for me is you can't lose him. He's the guy who I think has made the most. I know that Southeastern 16 talked about. I think he's made the most threes in the conference, not from a rate perspective, but just from a sheer numbers perspective. I think he's made the most threes in conference. And a lot of that's, he takes 8 to 12 threes a game, right? So he's a guy that just takes an absolute ton of them. And I think that Alabama just can't be discouraged if he makes a long one or if he makes a big one. And I think that that's something that, Alabama should be aware of because we see that with our guards as well, right? Like I think that and 1-3 by Amari Allen against Mississippi State, for example, was discouraging, right? Because the game was fairly close at that time, but it was kind of like, oh snap, everything they shoot's going in. And so I think that's you just can't be discouraged if Gillespie hits a hard 3 in somebody's face, right? Like if LeBaron gives good defense and he just makes a 3, sometimes good shooters make good shots. Like Nate Ament is gonna hit a shot over Amari Allen at some point, and we're gonna be like, damn. But there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like at a certain point, like sometimes a good shooter is gonna make a good shot, and I think that that's what Alabama fans just need to be aware of for this game is that shooters are gonna make shots, but I do think that LeBaron Filan his ability to guard Gillespie is going to be big in this game. But I also think Aiden Holloway, having him back with the fact that Nate's talked about his defense getting back better, I would not be shocked if Aiden Holloway doesn't get a decent number of minutes against him as well, because they are fairly guard light, whereas Alabama has a ton of guards they play. Tennessee does not. Gillespie is going to play, maybe not 40 minutes, but he's probably going to play 36. And so if he plays 36 minutes, we're going to have different guys transitioning on him, whether it be Trelly, whether it be Aiden, whether it be LeBaron. I wouldn't be shocked if you see Houston on him, right? Like you're going to see all different guys on him all game. So I think that that's what you just need to be aware of.
All right, Theo, we've been hanging out with Owen Barnes for this morning talking about Alabama basketball and Alabama's game with Tennessee. Alabama, number 3 overall in offensive efficiency from Lord Kenny Pomeroy, number 66 in defensive efficiency, and number 2 in pace. 19 overall in KenPom. Tennessee, 20 overall in KenPom with the number 37 offensive efficiency, the number 14 defensive efficiency. So big contrast there. And the biggest contrast, the number 278th team in pace this year. Kenny Pomeroy has Alabama losing 84-80. Theo, what will happen tomorrow at 5 o'clock?
I really like that 84-80 number. It feels like around where the game will be because I think this will be a very competitive basketball game. I also think it will be a little slower than Alabama wants it to be, right?
Yeah,
we talked about just how stark that difference is. And I don't think either team leaves the game thinking, oh, man, we controlled the pace. We played exactly the game of basketball that we wanted to play. I mean, now I've been a bit of a pessimist on this Alabama team all year, but I've picked the Crimson Tide to win a lot of games lately.
True.
That ends today. I do think that Tennessee snaps the win streak. Give me the Vols. I don't want to take Ken Palm's numbers. I'll go
okay.
Tennessee 82-76. 74 Vols win it.
Oh, how frustrating would that be? I am going to show faith in the fellas that are coming back. They're coming back from injury and they did not play in the last game against Tennessee. I think that Alabama will win a really close game. I'm going to go 83. I'll go 83-80. I'll go 80, so it's almost the Ken Palm score, but reversed. I'll go 83-80 Alabama. Now, Owen, you didn't want to make your prediction quite yet, and that is A-okay. Why don't you tell the people where they can find your prediction on your shows and on your platforms?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll go ahead and make one at the end. But if you want to follow the show, it's at Barnes on Bama. Like I said, as Joe mentioned, you can follow me on X, Twitter at OND Barnes. I do the pregame write-ups. I will have a full write-up for the Tennessee game. So if you're interested on who you need to watch and what Alabama needs to do in that game, just follow me over there on there. I really would appreciate it. I said it on my show, and I'm gonna give this a similar score as Theo, but I do think Alabama wins this one. And my difference maker for this game is Amari Allen. You've heard me say it a couple of times. I think that us having him to match up on Nate Ament is the difference in this game. Additionally, when you look at the fact that Alabama has a healthier version of Taylor Bowen, I think that's a huge deal. And when you look at the fact that Alabama lost that rebounding battle, Amari has been our best rebounder all season. I think that he comes in knowing that I think that Amari thinks like, hey, we maybe lost this first one because I wasn't available. Let me show what I'm capable of in this one. So I have 82-75. Alabama gets the win in Thompson Bowling.
Oh, I mean, at some point, Theo, the math has to flip back. You lose 5 in a row. At some point, you've got to. It goes the other way.
Yeah, that point will come next season.
Oh no. Oh no! Well, Owen, since you mentioned Amari Allen as your difference maker, I do have one more question because I've been throwing out a silly comparison, and well, I don't think it's silly, but people around me have thought it was silly. Since you're up on the basketball, I'll just ask you. I've been comparing Amari Allen to young freshman Grant Hill in the early '90s. Silly or not, react to that comparison.
I'm gonna be honest. I didn't watch Grant a ton as a freshman, so I don't know for sure. I will say that Amari Allen is going to be a guy that is going to surprise a lot of people. So there are some comparisons that I think that some people are going to look at as silly right now. But when you see what he's capable of, I think Amari is going to be just that kind of guy. When you look at, he's a guy who was a top 60-ish recruit, and he's now, if he was in another draft class, he's probably flirting with the NBA lottery. Like, this is a guy who's really shown what he's capable of. So I think that any comparisons, whether it be Grant Hill or others, are going to look way less silly once he's played 5 years in the NBA and is starting to sign his second contract, right? Like, there's going to be stuff like that where you're like, maybe there's not, like, would I make that comparison today? Probably not. But, like, I don't think that it's the craziest thing I've ever heard of all time.
All I heard was
it's up there.
I heard was I don't think it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Yes,
that's a win for you, Joe.
Hey, we'll take every win we can get right here. Let's transition real quick. Thanks so much. We're hanging out with Owen Barnes. We're going to move to baseball real quick because Theo's been covering Alabama baseball for BamaCentral.com. But before we do, we want to remind you the program is brought to you by Purple Turtle Roofing. At Purple Turtle Roofing, we're not just another contractor. We're your neighbor and your advocate when it comes to protecting your home or business. With years of hands-on experience, top-tier certification, and a commitment to excellence, we've built a reputation as Alabama's go-to roofing solution. We specialize in residential roofing, commercial roofing, emergency storm repairs, full-on roof replacement, insurance claim support, and more. Check them out online today at roofturtle.com. They'll come out and give you a free roof inspection. Make sure that your roof is good to go for the spring storm season. So check them out online today at roofturtle.com. Roofing with heart, built to last. Purple Turtle Roofing. All right, Theo, Alabama baseball took it on the chin. Really, Southern Miss took them behind the woodshed on Tuesday. Can Alabama bounce back? Heading out to Frisco, Texas. Preview the weekend. Alabama taking on Iowa, Oregon State, and Houston in kind of a marquee showcase out in Texas.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time for the Crimson Tide this weekend. You've got 3 interesting matchups. Iowa is not a great team. Crimson Tide takes on Iowa at 6 today. First of all, watching these games is really unfortunate situation. You have to pay $30 to D1 baseball if you want to watch the weekend games, which is a joke, quite frankly. I don't know why
we're going to set you up with a radio.
Yeah, I've got the code. I was able to get a friend who
Okay. All right.
an
Good.
LSU baseball fan who was willing to give me his code because it rolled over from last week. So I've got it, but not looking forward to it. Follow along on Bama Central for live updates. I'll be updating, be doing something just because I know a lot of people aren't able to watch. So Alabama plays Iowa today in a game that, quite frankly, you need to win. Like there's no real excuse for losing to this Big Ten program. Tyler Fay on the mound. You don't know exactly what you're going to get out of him. He's had some rough performances, but he's also shown like he's got the stuff, and he really did look solid with his command, with his pitch selection last Friday against Rhode Island. So I'm excited to see if he can really put together a dominant outing. I mean, he went 6 innings last time around, and then Saturday, Zane Adams, Ethan Kleinschmidt. This is an elite pitching matchup. Kleinschmidt for Oregon State was a third-team All-American last season. He was a phenomenal pitcher, and I mean, these are two guys who are getting their names thrown around in the MLB draft mix, right? Guys who will be likely going in the first 3 rounds of the draft, guys who are competing for postseason accolades, or postseason recognition, I guess. This could be the kind of game where these guys both are pitching into the 6th inning, and you've got low scoring, and it's what happens in the bullpen, what happens when you're finally able to get these guys out of the game, and that's what really concerns me for Alabama, because I don't know who you're turning to into the bullpen. That's where you should throw a Matty Hayberger or one of your best arms, but I feel like that is likely going to be Alabama's one loss on the weekend. I just don't see the Crimson Tide beating this really, really good Oregon State team. And then, you turn around Sunday and you throw a freshman, Miles Upchurch, who's been impressive, but you're throwing him against a Houston team that's really surprised a lot of people. So Sunday is going to be, when you look in terms of, is the weekend going to be a success? You're likely heading into Sunday at 1-1, and you have a lot hinging on what can this freshman do for us. And this could be one of the frustrating games for Upchurch this season, right? I mean, this is the first real test he's faced. He's so talented. I think he struck out 9 game 1, 7 game 2. This could be the game where, okay, they're able to run him out in the 2nd, 3rd inning. And a lot's on the lot. I mean, a lot will be found out about this Alabama team this weekend. I'm excited to see where it goes. I could see the team going 1-2. And, we're disappointed because you had the Southern Miss loss and you dropped these games. And you got to remember not to overreact, right, to early season baseball. But at the same time, there is reason for concern, right? We're going to learn stuff. I'm excited to see how things wind up. I think I'm going to predict 2-1 with the loss coming to Oregon State on Saturday. Upchurch takes care of business.
All right, Theo, we entered the season with a lot of the Alabama fan base feeling like, everybody's undervaluing Alabama, underrating Alabama. They should be ranked. They're not ranked. They should be ranked. They're going to be good. We're not very far into the season. We're 2.5. We're almost 3 weeks in. So it's still a baby. It's still an infant season. But are you still feeling like, this team is underrated, undervalued? They can be really good. They will be really good. Or have you seen some of the cracks in the foundation? Some of the problems that are flaws that maybe the preseason prognosticators put on Alabama?
Well, we've certainly seen why Alabama isn't ranked to start the year, right? Like all the flaws that people said the Crimson Tide had, yes, they had them. It's far from a perfect baseball team, but you also see the pieces in place for the team to turn things around, right? All the areas where this team is struggling.
Well, let's be clear. You said turn things around. They're 7-2.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Turn things around in the sense of start playing day in, day out like an elite baseball team, right? And you haven't been tested yet. I mean, quite frankly, you went down and you pitched a bullpen guy on Tuesday against Southern Miss on the road in a hostile environment, and things spiraled. And we're not going to put too much stock into a midweek loss. That's one of the things that I'm really trying to stress as a baseball writer this spring. And it's hard because we love reacting, right? And baseball is such a unique sport, but I really think, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But you were basically asking about
I was just asking
preseason expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Owen, you a big baseball guy, Owen?
I definitely enjoy going out to the ballpark, and I grew up not far from Hoover, so I grew up going to the SEC tournament with my dad. my whole life. So I definitely enjoy it. I played baseball, but I've it's hard for me to follow it when I've got basketball going on. Honestly, even like I definitely still follow football a ton when basketball is going on, but like basketball is kind of my primary sport. I will pick up baseball once basketball is over, and I know that's a rough thing to say, but that's just kind of how my world works. Because that's definitely what I follow more closely. But I definitely love spending time at the ballpark, and I've been keeping an eye on what Justin LeBron's got going on. In his quest for the number one overall pick.
Yeah, and LeBron's the reason that so many people feel this pressure around this team, right? Because you don't get a player like Justin LeBron often. You who knows when the next time you'll get a player, if you ever do, of this caliber, right? A bona fide, this guy may be the best player in college baseball right now. Does not happen a lot. And it will be viewed as a massive disappointment if you're not able to get to even a super regional with him, right? And that is a very strong possibility with this team, with this flawed baseball team. I don't think the preseason expectations were out of line. I think that Alabama was left out of the top 25 for a reason, right? We've seen the flaws on the team, but we also see that, yeah, I mean, you should be carrying yourself like a very high upside baseball team because you know what? You've got the superstar. You've got you've got a freshman Miles Upchurch will be in contention for National Freshman of the Year. He has shown that early. I fully believe it. You go out and you pitch a full weekend season as a freshman, you're going to be in the mix for that. And I think he's going to show some really good things. Can the pitching come along, right? Can the bullpen develop a couple more guys that we trust? We've got a guy in Caden Humphrey who could be the closer this season, and we haven't even seen him because of injury, right? That'll be a game changer if you have a lights out closer. So can the bullpen develop? Can we find guys that we trust? Can the middle of the order start hitting at a higher level? And then so much of it just comes down to 1 or 2 days in early June. And that is the reality of this sport. And that will, in many people's eyes, determine, was this a successful season or did we waste another year? And did we waste the career of Justin LeBron? Like, it's so arbitrary, right? And we're going to find out a lot about this team down the stretch. And I'm excited.
This weekend, 6 o'clock tonight against Iowa, 4 o'clock on Saturday against Oregon State, and 3 o'clock on Sunday against Houston. We encourage you to follow Theo Fernandez at Theo Fernandez _ on the Twitter machine for all the updates. And BamaCentral.com is going to give you some live updates as well, and recaps and write-ups as well after the game. Owen, we're running up on time, so we're going to skip really the 40 discussion, but I do want to throw these 40 times out there, and I'll get your reaction, and then Theo and I will take really a full look at the combine on Monday. You had LT Overton run a 4.86. It's kind of a disputed 4.87, 4.91, 4.86 on the 40 time. You had Justin Jefferson run 4.58, and you had Tim Keenan moving. Man, 5.32 from Tim Keenan. Absolutely just rolling down the track. Just the three defensive guys running the 40 yesterday. Deontay Lawson skipped on the 40. He said he's going to run it at his pro day. Oh, and what do you make of these three guys and their basically NFL futures and what they showed yesterday?
I think that Keenan probably helped running the 40. I think that his number was a good number, a guy of that size and what he's considered to be, right? Like just a nose tackle. The fact that he's got that speed with him, I think is a huge deal. I think that the one number that's probably a little eye-opening is the Justin Jefferson number. I think it's a little lower than what ideally you would want to see. We kind of talked about, I think that it's a little, I think some people think it's fine, but I think it's just a little slower than what I would ideally have hoped he was going to be able to run. But overall, I thought that the numbers were completely fine. Nobody, wowed. Nobody was terrible. These are just some of the 40 times of all time, so to speak. It's, nothing great or nothing bad, which generally is a pretty good thing. If the number scares you, then it's like, that's not good, right? Like, I don't think Justin Jefferson's number was slow enough to worry me, but I definitely think it was a little slower than I ideally would have wanted to see from him. I would have wanted to see like lower 4.5s, 4.58's a little slow for me.
I totally agree with you, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the guys compete in the underwear Olympics. We'll see Damani Jackson, Jeremy Bernard, Josh Cuevas. Ty Simpson reportedly going to throw up there, so that'll be pretty interesting after he got all his weight back after the gastricitis I guess disease that he came upon towards the end of the year. So it's going to be an interesting week up in Indianapolis as well. Make sure that you are checking us out at BamaCentral.com, as we'll be covering Alabama basketball tomorrow against Tennessee. We've got a big softball weekend, a huge baseball weekend as well. So all kinds of coverage of everything happening at the Capstone on BamaCentral.com. Please make sure you follow Owen Barnes at Owen D Barnes on the Twitter machine. Make sure you check out and subscribe to his YouTube channel at Barnes on Bama for more Alabama basketball coverage and discussion. You can find that right there. I really appreciate Owen giving us his time this morning. And follow Theo Fernandez at Theo Fernandez _. We're going to have a great day. You're going to have a great weekend. We will talk to you again on Monday right here on the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central, BamaCentral.com.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central. Keep up with Joe on all his social media pages at Joe Gaither 6. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to read us daily at BamaCentral.com.